everyone see the screen shared there?
Yes.
Yep.
Is that okay? Great, thank you. Right, so welcome to everyone. Great to have such a brilliant turnout this morning. Just want to say thank you to all our contributors today. It's really helpful when we've got national organisations that we can get together in this way and share the learning around the Midlands. So we are recording part one of this webinar where we've got the presentations. When we go on to part two with the question time panel, we sort of try and use those Chatham House sort of principles really, and we won't record that because it's an opportunity for people to talk about their own situations and management issues and queries that they may have in their local authority. So it's sort of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas in terms of the rules, and just keeping that to ourselves today. So we won't record that, but everything else will be recorded and it'll be on our website within a week or so. So thank you all for that. Thank you for contributors. And we had a small amount of lottery funding, community fund, to help us put together a couple of events. So we're doing this one for managers and officers, and then we're doing something for community green space groups in Nottingham in May. So we're just working on that programme. So it's really to encourage groups who are on the in a position to take on management leases, licenses, that sort of thing, and just sharing some best practice. So St Anne's are hosting that, so thank you to them. So I'll move on to, this is our agenda for the day. We're going to start with Chris Warman in a moment, who's recently left Rugby Borough Council, but he's going to talk about the self-management process they did there. Then we've got some slides about the Southwark Council guarantee. We're really fortunate to have our West and East Midlands reps and mentors online today. So thank you all for coming together. We're a Midlands organisation, as you know, covering the East and the West. So that's great to have you all on. And then Liz Bunting from the National Allotment Society is going to talk about some best practice ideas for site reps and stewards on site. We're going to have a short break at around 12 o'clock, just for 10 minutes or so, just for a comfort break and grab a drink. And then in part two, we're going to talk to Borneo Street Allotment representative Christine McCreary. And then Wayne Priestley from APSI has kindly joined us today about their recent allotment report. And then for all those other tricky subjects that we don't cover in earlier throughout the meeting, we've got our question time panel for anyone who's able to stay for that. So that's really good. So I will then introduce Chris Warman. I think what I'm going to do, Chris, is stop sharing our slides now, because you're just going to talk amongst about your experience. We've got no slides, and then people will actually be able to see your face. So you should be able to see Chris now on your screen.
Not quite sure everyone wants to see my face, but there you go. I am obviously speaking on behalf of Rugby. Obviously, I have recently moved positions. Before I start, and just to encourage people to stop with the whole of this seminar, you have some wonderful people here from the National Association, Colin, Liz and Tom, who basically helped us through at Rugby. So they are excellent people to support you in your allotments. I can't speak high enough of them. So that they're perfect people to have on this seminar. What I will do, because this in Rugby, I call this my tin hat moment. Because it really was my tin hat moment in Rugby. There was lots of reasons why self-management was coming around in Rugby, but I'll be honest, the biggest problem in Rugby with the allotments was the Borough Council, and I say that openly, honestly, because we were becoming we only had 6 sites that we managed directly ourselves, but we had a full-time member of staff and a computer system, and because of those 2 bits, all our on costs that the council machine puts onto that service meant that we were running at a cost of £113,000 to run 6 allotments, to which we charged between £25 and £35 per plot a year rent. So we were subsidising each plot by about £280, which is ridiculous, and we were ineffective in how we were dealing with the allotments. We hadn't got, whilst I got a number of staff, they got a budget to do improvements with, so it was very clunky. And I did say at the first meeting, we are a problem as the council, and I'm very open and honest with that. And I think Liz was there, and I think Tom was there, and possibly Connor as well. So I was very honest, and took a bit of flack over it, if I'm honest. But there's only one way to play this, and that is being upfront. But all the way through, and the proof is there now, there was never any intention to sell allotments. The allotment land remains and will always remain borough council land for allotments. Yeah, we weren't trying to make money. There was nothing like that, and it's definitely not a cut in allotments. We wanted allotments. We want allotment provision. But we as a council were a hindrance in that whole process, and we were very open with allotment holders and tenants around that, because we had to be. Allotment demand was always high. It remains high to this day. We've built in the planning system for more allotments to come on stream, and since then more allotments are coming on stream. I think Colin's involved with one, a new one that's coming on board in Rugby as we speak. And we also had a couple of other allotment associations in Rugby to use as a bit of an example to show people what can be done, the possibilities, and more importantly, the opportunities of being self-managed. It goes back to councils being very clunky and not the best. So we worked with the association. We had a mass meeting initially, and then broke that down into allotment sites, for want of a better word, the 6 sites, and took it that way. We were very lucky that we had a number of people within those allotment association or allotment sites that sort of got the opportunity and understood the huge benefits of becoming an allotment association. So they formed like satellite committees, for want of a better word, just to see it through. And we worked with Tom and Colin in terms of making sure everything was done correctly. We actually paid up front 3 years membership of the National Association to those allotment sites. And to do that, it was about being transparent. So whatever our legal department put in a lease, it would go across the National Association as a double check to protect the new allotment associations, because that's key to it all, that it's abundantly open and transparent and no one's trying to do anything unnecessary to anybody, because there was initially a lot of mistrust against the council, and I get that, which is why we were very keen to build in from the very start the links with the National Association, and they're still linking today, I'm pleased to say. So after a couple of interesting meetings, what we agreed to do, we walked around each site, agreed outstanding works, for want of a better word, and I managed to get council to agree to put some money up for that as a one-off to clear the backlog of this fence is broken, that rubbish needs clearing, that plot's overgrown, so to get into a state that the association could then take forward themselves. So we did all that. All 6 are now fully associated. All 6 are operating. That's not to say that there's been a few hiccups along the way. Of course there is, we live in a real world, but that's actually where the National Association can help. And I say help, not just help the association, actually helped us as a council navigate some of those hiccups, because it's people, and allotment agreement is a legal document, so you have to be very careful in terms of how you do things. So I think me and Liz had several conversations about one in particular. I was on a train at the time, but we got around that one, and we can work through things like that. But you work through it with the associations and the National Association. You create a much better framework for dealing with things, and a very open, transparent way of dealing with things. So all of a sudden, all that mistrust against the council starts to disappear. And I'll use what I think we used to call it Eastlands allotments. They've now renamed themselves, I believe. They've now put in lottery bids for compostable toilets, which it is my privilege in a couple of months' time to go back and open. So I think I've reached the pinnacle of my career opening a compostable toilet, because whilst initially they didn't see the benefits, as soon as they got to association, realised the freedom they have and the money that's available to them via various different pots. They've now got school plots down there, they've got educational plots down there, they've got the compostable toilet down there, and they've taken it to a whole new level. So it can be done. It wasn't easy. I lost the last bits of my hair, if I'm honest, doing it. But I still believe it's the right thing to do, because it's protected those allotments forever. And not just that, those allotment sites now are in a far, far better condition than under my management. I'm being honest about that. They are the tenants are happier because they've got people on site. They've all got waiting lists. We've got a new site to the north of Rugby coming on stream now, Eden Park. Again, a site that's been a bit of a nightmare because of development issues and developer issues. But we have, as I left, money was going forward for that. They're in conversation, I think, with Colin or Tom, I'm not quite sure, to move that one forward and actually get some stuff on the ground. And they've got huge plans for that site. Sites that I could never deliver as a manager within a local authority. So that's my experience of going from local authority managed through to associations on allotments. Would I do it again? Yes, I would. For all those reasons I've just stated, that local authorities can be a problem in all this. The caveat being that bottom line, that security net, if you like, that land is forever allotment land, is council land. And we protected that forevermore within the authority for that reason. And again, it stops that mistrust. And I know, I think we were halfway through doing it, someone rang me up saying, I hear you saying the allotments. I went, well, where have you heard that from? Who said that? We're not selling allotments. Well, we're here, you're selling it to some sort of association. No, so you do come across those hurdles en route. But again, the three people are here from the National Association, or the experts, if you like. I think Colin's worn a few tin hats with me, I think, through some of the meetings. But we get there, and it's just understanding the concerns of the allotment holders. And a lot of it is about perceptions, and some of those concerns are unfounded, but that's their concerns. So you have to take them seriously and just work through those concerns to a point of where actually the reality comes in, and they understand that we're not trying to do the wrong thing, we're trying to do the right thing here. And that's where the National Association really came in, which is why we offered to pay for those first three years membership for them, for all the new associations, just to embed within the whole new associations that those sort of principles of being open. And if we are doing something wrong and we do make mistakes, that the association are there to tell us that actually you shouldn't put that in a lease, Chris, that's not right, or whatever. And I think by and large, actually, we got there in terms of the leases were pretty good, just with some tweaks here and there in the wording. So that's my experience. I don't know how we want to do questions, Alison, because I've got to run off.
Have we got time for a couple of questions, Chris, from the audience?
Yes, if there's any question now, I can take them now. If not, when I get back, I'll link back in, and if it's on, I'll join the question time later.
Okay. Any questions out there?
Yeah, Nicola. Silence.
Hi, Chris. Nicola from St Anne's Allotments. I just wondered what training you offered or provided for those associations, just to ensure that they were also operating within the tenancy law, allotment law, but also from a point of inclusion and equality. Did you do any training with those associations?
We didn't have any specific training. We basically linked to international association to provide all that guidance for them. But we didn't do any specific training per se.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add, we were in a similar situation in a local authority that I worked in prior to this role, and again the support of the National Allotment Society and our regional rep who came to an evening meeting to talk as that independent, as that sort of reliable source was essential for us really in sort of engaging, because it's all about partnerships, isn't it? And that's our theme for our conference this year. We're just talking about that and building relationships. When you're one manager to build that resource, you've got that single resource. Of course, you can't run every site where a group of people who come together with the same outcomes and aims. It's so different, isn't it? And your resources are so limited in a local authority.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, that first meeting, so Liz was there. It was my tin hat moment. I knew we had to do it that way for that reason, and because Liz saw the sort of the comments I was getting and the verbal abuse I was getting, for want of a better word. If you hold that meeting today, it'll be different because we'll overcome that. It is a process you have to go through. And a lot of what the angst that Liz and Tom witnessed was the angst against the council because we weren't doing it right and we weren't providing what they wanted. By becoming associations, they've got what they want and their opportunities are now in front of them. So it is a process, and which is why I put my tin out on at the beginning of that, because you have to go through it. You have to take that angst out of it to move on from that. Otherwise, it's always there.
Any more questions? I think we've got Ruth with a question.
Yeah, hi, just a quick question, Chris. I was just wondering what level of devolved management you went for. Did the council retain any responsibilities, admin responsibilities, or was it quite a high level of devolved management?
We have no admin responsibilities at all. There's some sites that are problematic in terms of boundaries. But so we've kept some sites with boundaries that are issues, purely because that was too much for the allotment associations. And when I say issue, I mean legal issues. So there's a couple of sites where we kept boundaries. Each site was different. Where there's some sites that had no boundary issues but needed new fencing. The association have got it because they can put bids in for new fencing. But there's one site in particular. It's the one where me and Liz had a number of conversations on a train about where the boundaries were very problematic. So we said, look, to save problems, we've got a legal department. We'll hold on to that boundary and we'll retain responsibility for that boundary, because that's not fair to the association. Because it's historic, it involves council houses and all sorts of other stuff, and what's in people's rents and lease, council house properties sales from 1962 and whenever. So it was just far too complicated to pass that across, and unfair to an association.
Okay. No, that's interesting. Just because in Derby we have 19 leased sites, and they're all at the same level, and it's a high level of devolved management, and that's fine for most of the sites. And then we always have a few sites that for whatever reason are just, perhaps the association isn't as strong, and the volunteers don't always have the skills and the capacity. So I'm just interested, that's all, just to hear at what level other local authorities are at. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, they do all the site inspections, or the bookings, or the tenancy stuff. That they deal with all that.
Right.
Okay, thanks then, Chris. We'll let you go off to your next meeting, and hope to see you later on.
Yeah, I hope to come back in a bit. Brilliant.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. And hello to Liz, Colin and Tom. Nice to see you. Right, okay. We're going to move on now then to
a presentation that the National Allotment Society have put together for us today. So this was done by Di Appleyard. I'm sure many of you have met and talked to Di over the years. She was very fundamental in supporting some of the regional allotment forums we held in the West Midlands. So she's very recently left the organisation, but she's put this together as just an alternative way of looking at potential land use. So she's liaised with Southwark Council, one of the 32 London boroughs, about their new approach to offering food growing land. So obviously, you know, there's a huge amount of pressure, relentless pressure on land in the capital. And Southwark Council took a different approach to how they might create more opportunities. So what they've launched is an allotment expansion guarantee, allowing residents to grow on housing land. So they are informal allotments, and I'm sure if there's any legal questions about this, Liz will be able to help us answer. So it's slightly different to the statutory allotments because I believe because it's London and it's managed differently, each borough regulates their own. So this was put together by the Housing Department, and there are now 2 job share coordinators solely dedicated to supporting this new expansion guarantee. They've been in contact with us. They're really keen for us to share this information today. So their aim was to create 200 growing plots as part of what they're calling their Great Estate programme. So they created a dedicated website where people can get information. They can drop a pin onto a map where they would like to grow and send in an expression of interest form. So we've got a web link there. I can put that in the chat for you later as well about how they might do this and go about that. So, you know, they're committed, you know, as part of, you know, net zero, food growing, local food, community programmes, the guarantee. And as long as there is a small group of residents, they will aim to support that project. So that's an example of, you know, their interactive map of Southwark and what they're developing to date. So the group must consist of at least 5 interested residents. And the potential site needs to be suitable for growing food and ideally made secure. So I think the key thing there is this partnership that the coordinators help the group to draw up a project plan and offer advice. And I think going back then to, you know, to Nicola's question, it is about empowerment, about the council offering that support to find the land, to secure the land, and then to create that ongoing support for them to grow. Because out on their own, obviously, it's a very difficult thing to do. So the Southwark growers are now gardening in 62 new plots. That's the update that they've just given us, in 5 new gardens through this piece of work. And they're just preparing another 3 sites for the end of this month. So what I've just put on the next slide is some links if you want to see more about that. There's a YouTube link there just talking to some of the residents about their experiences and how they felt the process worked. And those are the 2 email addresses for the 2 coordinators. You know, I haven't spoken directly, and thanks again to Di and the National Allotment Society for putting this together. I'm just wondering if there's any questions on that we might be able to answer in, you know, legal terms or anything like that while we've got our experts in the room. We've got questions from Wayne. Shall we go to you first?
Yeah, thank you, Alison. I was just curious, the sort of sites that they're choosing. Forgive me if I missed it, but are these people's gardens, or are they bits of green space within a housing estate that they're looking to develop?
Do you have any information on that, Liz?
Well, they're certainly outside the statutory allotment sort of group. It is more spare land. My understanding is it's more spare land elsewhere. So yeah, that's I think what they're developing.
I think because housing team are involved, it may be that it's retained housing land or something like that, where it's adjacent to those sort of properties. But I'm not sure if there's any information on that on their website or in the video they're weighing. But we can try and find out some more information for you if that would help.
Certainly, we'll do that.
Yeah, I think it'd be really helpful, because I know I developed an allotment site many years ago on a housing estate which had previously been like a post office and a bank, and we leveled the ground and dug it all out, and the issues that were involved in things like contamination and discussions with neighbours and that, it was a heck of a process to get it developed. We did eventually get it developed, and it's an absolute model. But I was just curious as to whether sometimes you'll get people saying, well, I've got a back garden and I don't really use it, so therefore somebody may as well have it for growing. Or as we were saying there, is it something that Liz was mentioning, you know, it's just spare pieces of land. And again, the issue might be, well, they might want to grow food on there, but that's a place where the kids have a kick around. So it's just, I'm just wondering how they've addressed those sort of issues.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity is I'll engage with Ruth and Sophie, and I'll see if I can put something in our next newsletter about just a bit of background information on that, Wayne.
Thanks for that, Alison. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Christine, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I have indeed. This is a very, very interesting project, I have to say. Over the last 2-3 weeks or so, we've been having some discussions amongst ourselves at Borneo Street. Over the last 18 months in Walsall, we've been undertaking a survey because we have sites in one part of the borough which are now derelict, and we have a shortage of sites in another part of the borough where we have a serious demand. So we're looking at how to make the best and provide allotments in other areas, but also in general provide more healthy green spaces for people to grow produce and to get involved in gardening, doing whatever. So I'm quite interested because we have identified a particular site near us which currently there are horses grazing on it. It's a beautiful area, quite large, and the challenges are, well, you know, how do we go about developing this? So I'm quite keen to understand how they've managed to create and develop areas of land in Southwark. Same way as Wayne is, really. It's exactly the same question. How have they managed to get this land back into cultivation?
Sorry, Liz, were you about to respond?
Yes. I mean, obviously, one of the first aspects that you need to pursue is the ownership of the land.
This is council land.
It is council land.
It's council land, and the council, when I first broached the subject, they're very much in favour because it's part of an answer to their prayers. So we've got no problem there. And it's because it's a field. I'm not even worried about contamination. I think I'm more worried about, you know, sort of our initial thoughts is to use a no-dig method. But then it's understanding and having some idea how other people have tackled, like, you know, just creating boundaries, roads, that sort of thing. It's something that needs to be planned carefully, and I just wanted to understand what your experiences were and how you went about it.
Yeah, I think I'll try and get more information from Southwark on that one in particular. I think there's, am I right in thinking there's an ARI document on creating a new allotment from sort of disused land? I think there might be something there. I've got some links right at the end of the presentation, Christine, that might point you to some more resources on that.
Thank you, that would be useful.
Okay, brilliant. Right, okay, I'll go back to sharing. And then we will look at our next presentation. So this is an opportunity then to introduce our regional mentors and representatives who are in the room. I think we've got some of them in the room. So it's great for your future contacts. Again, as Chris has mentioned, they're an absolute powerhouse of support. I know that Colin came to Walsall some years ago and supported some of our meetings. So I'm just going to stop sharing the screen again then, and if we can go to Colin, Tom, Russell, and I'm not sure if Paul's in the room, but we can then just have a chat about your role and how you work with allotment communities. Shall we go to Colin first?
Hello everybody, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Right, I'm Colin Bedford. I'm the West Midlands mentor. As Chris said, I've worked very closely with rugby in terms of their movement from direct let to self-managed. Basically, our rationale for existing is to protect allotments and promote allotments. I think probably it's best for us each to just say who we are first, and I can then say perhaps a bit more about what we do afterwards.
Okay, Tom, do you want to come online? Do you want to put your video on as well?
Yeah, I've just done that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so everyone hear me, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work with Colin, you know. I'm the regional rep for the West Midlands. I sit on the board at head office, and like I think probably a lot of people know, but us reps and mentors, we're all volunteers. Head office is where we have the legal people and the people that need to do the necessary work that needs to keep things running smoothly. But first of all, we are all volunteers, and me and Colin just put in a tremendous amount of work, especially this last sort of 6 or 8 months. We've had a hell of a workload, but I won't go into too much detail now. That's just explaining, you know, what I do. I'm also vice chair of the National Allotment Society. Okay.
Okay, Russell.
Good morning. Yes, I'm Russell Atwood. I'm from Kettering in Northamptonshire and an East Midlands regional mentor. I'm relatively new in this role, but I recently retired from my job after 39 years teaching as a school teacher. But I have been allotment secretary, a self-managed society, which has 4 sites in the town of Kettering for many years, and about 20 years, and had my allotment. So I've experience of the self-managing side and committee and how we could train up sort of volunteers. And now I'm moving into this mentoring role on a regional basis. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, it's great to hear about then the type of support that you can offer. I know, Colin, you've mentioned rugby, but particularly for our East Midlands members today, that would be really good to hear about the type of thing that you can do, and perhaps some examples from the East Midlands as well, Russell.
Yes, well, as a mentor, I think my main role is to encourage creation of new allotments, and perhaps when there is a sort of move to self-management, to get the allotments, as people said about training earlier, when you're going from in rugby and where other places, when you're going from direct management to self-management, then obviously you need volunteers like myself, but for the volunteers for the societies or allotment sites that you create, that are competent and follow, due process and have the skills to be able to manage the people and the land together, and obviously work with teams of others and make sure that everything gets done that needs to get done, whether it's filing the accounts, whether it's having good bank account, all those sort of admin side, or managing evictions or other things when there's neglected plots, and waiting lists, and waste management and other things that are the day-to-day life of allotments.
Brilliant. Are there any questions for any of our reps or mentors from our audience? Ellen, I can see your hands up. Have you got a question?
Sorry, I was on mute, talking away on mute. Sorry, I have got a question. Yeah, I'm contacting from Staffordshire Moorlands and High Peak Borough Council. I'm new to the post, so I haven't actually had experience of managing allotment sites before. Referring to quite a large site with 85 plots on it. Admittedly, it has been neglected for some years previously, and therefore has developed some quite complex issues. But I was just wondering if you could just talk us through a little bit more about the process of going from council managed into association, because I think it'll have to be a bit of a hand-holding process and something that isn't rushed. As I say, it's a large, complex group, and so I just wondered if you could have, is mentors actually have the facilities to come out and meet with the interested parties, or how does that process work?
Can I answer that, Alison? Yep. What we did, as Chris said, in terms of Rugby, there was presentations to as many of the existing plot holders as possible, and then to individual sites. Are you just talking about one site, Helen? Oh, right, okay.
Ellen, you're just on mute.
Hi, I'm sorry about that. I'm having problems with my internet, and I just missed some of.
Is it just one site, Ellen?
Sorry, Colin, can you say that again?
Is it just one site?
It is actually two sites. The other site is much smaller. There's only 6 plots, and there aren't nearly so many problems there.
Right. With 6 plots, it would be near enough impossible for them to work as a devolved managed site. But that doesn't mean they couldn't work with the other site. But the key really is communication, and it's important that the prospective plot holders are drawn into the conversation fairly early on. From that, what we did, and I've worked with Warwick as well, is to get an interim management group going, because as such they haven't formed an association yet. I would work with that group. We'd go through our model agreements with them in a group of about 6 or 8 people, where they can talk about any concerns they've got about tenancy agreements, any concerns about the management of money, etc. So that it took about a year to go from being direct let through to being self-managed, and a lot of hand-holding went on during that time, and a lot depends on the people involved. I found both that Rugby and Warwick, some sites took to it like a duck to water. Others needed a lot more support, were very cagey about the roles that individuals had to take on board. But really, this is where the National Association can help. Now, we've got the experience through our own backgrounds, plus working with other authorities. We can help to get, sort of carve our way through to a situation where people feel comfortable about taking on the various roles and responsibilities. Does that make sense, Ellen?
Yeah, it does. Thanks very much, Colin. That was really, really helpful. You know, it's a big topic, and I would quite like to unpick it in a little bit more detail, perhaps with yourself and with Liz. But I don't want to take over the session anymore with my questions, so I'll leave it at that. But yeah, really helpful. Thank you very much, and I'll.
Ellen, that's fine. That's what the whole purpose of today is, and I'm sure actually the next presentation, when Liz is talking about informal sort of relationships and building those relationships with site reps, I'm sure that will help you as well. So that's great. Are there any more questions from anyone? No, okay. In that case, then we will move on to our next presentation. So it's over to you, Liz. And Liz is going to be talking about working with site reps and stewards on direct let sites and some best practice ideas. So Liz, just let me know as you want me to move any slides on for you.
Yes, just to say, some of my slides obviously need a couple of clicks because it brings other things in. But yeah, I'll keep you on board on that one. Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Liz Bunting. I'm the Legal and Operations Manager of the National Allotment Society. I've been with this society now, I'm in my 12th year. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to explore with you the options of site representatives and stewards within the direct let structure. We're going to look at what the options what options are available, and the sort of attributes that those people could bring to that site rep structure, and also what needs to be in place for the smooth working of the role. Thank you. Next slide. That's lovely. So all authorities do operate differently, and so this is obviously a generic presentation, so you take from it the best practice that is applicable for your own situation. Could you give another click, please? That's lovely. Thank you. So first of all, it's thinking about the role, and that can include obviously operational aspects. So the site steward, site secretary is going to be the first point of contact for the plot holders. They're going to ensure that the information is distributed correctly, and they'll also be the first point for outside agencies as well, and neighbours to the site. As I've said there in the second point there, plot and site monitoring. These people on site are the eyes and the ears, so reporting of incidents, accidents on site, and then that will lead to a review of any risk assessments, and of course communication to the plot holders, because that is important when you're looking at working risk assessments. They are working documents and need to be communicated. Depending on the size of the site, you may need someone for deliveries on a regular basis. Also, looking at the waiting list and vacancies, normally this would be managed by the council with input from the site. In particular, though, those letting of plots, and to ensure that there is a robust policy and procedure in place there. And finally, of course, we're all aware of disputes on site. Site reps will be the first point of contact for this, of course, and generally it's a good idea to advise to take the personalities out of the equation and concentrate on the issues. So if issues can be settled in an informal way, if not, then there should be a reporting structure in place to take those issues to the next level. Next slide, please, Alison. Thank you. So we're looking at sound allotment practice, and within this role, there can be further requirements for the promotion of, next click please, of an efficient water use. We're all aware of precious resources, and the promotion of water harvesting is an educational process, and that's something that you may want to get site representatives and stewards involved in. Also, again, composting is another educational aspect on the sites to be encouraged, and if done correctly, can be highly beneficial to the site and to the gardeners. With regard to recycling, I mean, obviously, environmentally, that is essential. And we all know that allotment holders are renowned for their expertise in this area. Next slide, please, Alison. So here I've just outlined a few person specification aspects. So you're going to be looking for somebody who's physically able, who is well organised and methodical, able to deal with people, and in a professional and helpful manner, also IT illiterate, and have email and have practical allotment experience, and also would be useful previous experience as a volunteer leader. And also you may be requiring some recognised certificates there. Another click, and so yeah, that shows that there's a lot more to that volunteer position, and you've got to remember that this is a volunteer position. Next slide, please, Alison. So putting it all together, here we've got the role description, the role, decide on the capabilities that you have in-house, what additions would be useful for your sites, and then how will the site representatives be appointed? I mean, there are different methods used. Some advertise this volunteer role, others have complex sort of on-site voting systems. So you need to think about how that's going to work when you're implementing this sort of system. Next slide, please, Alison. Thank you. The volunteer agreement, you need to ensure that you've got a robust agreement in place there, and that it emphasises the fact that this is a volunteer position, not to create an employment contract, and that also is important. Next slide, please. Induction, training and support package. This is the vital to start this role with induction and training, because it provides the framework for how this role is performed in the future. So you need to give somebody a good base there with regard to how it should be performed. Next slide, please. Health and safety training. Again, you need to ensure that a site representative is aware of the basic risk assessments and the reporting accidents and incidents that you've got on site. Next slide, please. Dealing with data. I mean, it may be that there is some GDPR training that's essential there with regard to the sharing protocols. Next slide, please. You're looking at expenses. There may be a situation where you need to have a detailed expenses claim system in place, and also insurance. Volunteers need to understand that they are covered by the local authority public liability insurance and also employers' liability insurance. Next slide, please. It's always a good idea to have in place a confidentiality agreement, and then you need to be, thank you, next slide please, you need to be looking to offer a first-class service to your plot holders. And that next slide please puts all that together from the National Allotment Society. Questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Liz. Shall we go to, I'll just stop sharing there so we can see everyone clearly. Do we have any questions for Liz on that information there? I can't see any hands other than Christine and Wayne, and I think that's probably from the last questions.
No, Alison, if you don't mind, I do have a question. Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Hi, Liz.
Hello.
A really comprehensive review there of everything that's going to be required of a steward or a site rep. Are these in relation to where the site is run by the local authority, or would this site rep be on where it's run by an association? Because I just saw a lot of those requirements sort of very much tying into where a local authority would be involved.
Absolutely, yes. This is looking at it from the direct let point of view, where the tenancy agreement goes from the council to the individual plot holder.
So could some of those sort of roles and responsibilities be put on self-management, where you have some of those would certainly fit in with what's required?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously, when you're taking on self-management, particularly totally devolved self-management, then the majority of those requirements do go onto that self-managed, the committee of that association to run the site.
Yeah, I just think it would be quite a useful training package when people are looking at self-management, that they've got that list of things they would need to be responsible for, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, that is part of the training that we give, that the National Allotment Society give, with regard to people taking on self-management, certainly, yeah.
Thank you.
Liz, I was just wondering then about your training. Is that something you do online for local authorities, if anyone was interested in looking at that in further detail?
Yes, we certainly do tend to do through the local Association of Local Council Clerks and the Society of Local Council Clerks, parish and town council training, which covers, we've got 3 webinars which we're going forward with at the moment, and that's tenancy agreements and policies, site facilities and health and safety, and the final one is self-management from the council point of view. So it's going forward. So we've got those 3 webinars which we've produced.
Great. So if any of our members today are interested, can they can contact you directly about any training?
Yeah, I've got a programme of webinars which are going ahead sort of throughout the year. So yes, we can we can assist there. And of course, the regions will also help associations from the self-management point of view, and we've got presentations there that we can provide as well.
Fantastic. Christine, your hand's up. Is that another question from you?
No, it isn't. It's from the last time, Alison.
No problem. Okay. Right, that's great. We've actually reached the point for a short break. So we're going to take 10 minutes if that's okay with everyone, and then we'll return with Christine's presentation and some our question time sort of panel. So can I ask everyone to be back at 10 minutes past 11 if that's okay? Is 10 minutes long enough for everyone? Is that okay? Great. Okay, see you all in 10 minutes then. Thank you to everyone. We'll just wait for 1 more minute, Christine, till it's 10 past. So we'll just make sure everyone's back in the room. Oh, that was a really nice picture. I took that from your Facebook page yesterday. Well, I think we're just on about 10 minutes now. So, Christine, are you okay if I hand over to you to talk about life at Borneo Street allotments?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Firstly, on behalf of Borneo Street allotments, I would like to say a very, very big thank you for inviting us to share our world with you. Apart from the slide that Alison's just put up, and that was a slide from when the local Butts Primary School last came to visit. We try to do it every year, and we're hoping to resume operations this year. But I haven't put any more slides together for 2 reasons. One, I was out of the country, and secondly, in actual fact, Borneo Street is a very, very dynamic association, and we feel that we've got quite a bit to offer. So if you'd like to see what we do, and certainly if you'd like to become a member, we have a Borneo Street Facebook group, and we tend to share what we're getting up to on that group regularly. We've also got as well, I remember exactly that, 4 other Facebook group sites. We've got Borneo Street, Our Wonderful Wildlife, Borneo Street, the recipe page, Borneo Street, Love Your Bees, and most recently we've got Borneo Street, Yoka's Magic Garden Club, and you'll see why. But please, you know, we'd love you to join. You can contact me via that page. I'm always happy to talk to people, to share ideas, to share suggestions, you know, and experiences, whatever we can do. So, Borneo Street. Well, this year is actually a very, very special year indeed for Borneo Street, because this year we celebrate our 100th birthday. And we've taken the date of the Sunday, the 10th of July, as being our birthday. The reason being is, firstly, in 1922, that's when statutory allotment came into being. And secondly, because we know that the Walsall Council purchased the land through a mortgage with the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries at that time. And the first rent collector was appointed in July. So we're going to have a nice big party. We've got all sorts of things going, and that's all happening on the 10th of July. So the Facebook page should be really, really busy around that time. In between that time and the current day, we were council managed, and then in the early part of this century, we were part of East Walsall Local Management Association. So at first, Borneo Street was part of a group which consisted of about 5 allotment sites. As and when Walsall Council decided that they were looking to put in devolved management for sites, there was an opportunity for sites to vote as to how they wanted to look after themselves, if they did, or whether they wanted to stay part of associations or whatever. And we had a vote. 98% of tenants on our site voted in favour. Sorry? No?
Sorry, I think it was some interference there, Christy.
Some interference, okay. First voted in favour, and so we set up Borneo Street Allotment Association. The site itself consists of 40 large traditional sized plots, although we've now currently we've altered them down, and we've honed them down and broken them down into more bite-sized chunks to meet the current demand. But that's what it looks like when we first started. But unfortunately, a lot of those plots were in a seriously dilapidated state. At the bottom of the site, on what is now our compost farm, we had a pile of rubbish, which was around 30 foot by 40 foot in diameter. We'd got flushing toilets, but there was no money for any salt toilet roll. There was absolutely nothing. We've got no money to do anything with. All our money was paid into an association with a group of sites, and it was really difficult to get any of that money out, and that was really why we decided to go it alone. So how did we go about it? First and foremost, we got a roll of wallpaper out. Wallpaper is a brilliant thing to use. For the simple reason you can spread it out, and we used it to create a 5-year plan. We got together, there were 6 of us on the committee, and we sort of put out a mind map, which is an idea. Where do we want to be in 5 years' time? So once we got that, we got something that tangible that we could work towards. Anyone looking to set up their own association, there are a few things that they really, really need to have in place. And Liz Bunting has kindly told us about the main things. But what from the grassroots level that I would suggest is you must have a strong constitution, a robust tenancy agreement, an enthusiastic committee, and even more importantly, you must keep comprehensive records and use very detailed accounting principles. That way, everything that you do, I use the principle of if it isn't written down, it didn't happen, and that stands in good stead. Now, written down could mean on paper, it could even mean text, email, messenger, Facebook Messenger, but you've got something there as a record of what's gone on and what's happened, what he said, what she said, so that if need be, you've got it there. The one thing as well, there's a couple of other things actually thinking about it. It's very important to work alongside your local council. The local council, Alison I worked with when she was in post, and Alison, brilliant. She's a legend in Walsall, is our Alison. But I do have to say, our current members of council officers, they're really, really helpful and supportive. And we work together. I help them and they help us. And it gets along quite well. Fundamentally, Borneo Street Allotment is run as a non-profit making business. And we have a motto, whatever we do, it's got to be right. Okay. The other thing that we do is we take a view that whatever happens on our site, it's not just about growing vegetables and what have you, and sort of flowers or whatever you want to do. It's fundamentally an opportunity to put a capital C into community, and that community is not just what's within our gates, but it's also outside. Because the biggest thing is that your local community are your eyes and ears when you're not on site. Okay. So once we set up Borneo Street Allotment Association, what did we do then? Well, it was blatantly obvious because we got very little capital. Apart from collecting our annual rent, for which we put inside, first again, we put in together a solid business plan. We worked out what we needed to run that site, to pay our bills, and to give us a bit of room if we needed to do repairs, so if we got some money to do it. And then we divided it out between the cost of the plots. And that's how it worked out. What I would say is when you do start to work with an association, it doesn't just happen overnight. We were fortunate in that 98% of our members wanted to go independent, if you like. But there's also the remaining 2%. So we were very, very conscious of the fact that we had to win over that 2% if we were to move forward as a strong, solid community. It's very much about hearts and minds, and that doesn't just happen overnight. So what we did, we looked for a couple of quick wins as to how we could improve things, so that we could demonstrate to our members and to reinforce in their minds that working together and looking after ourselves would reap benefits for everyone within a short space of time. So what did I do? We had a trading hut, which the mice were enjoying, but not very many people were. So I set up and relaunched the trading hut. And for the first 12 months, we operated on a completely non-profit making basis. It was basically just having things available that plot holders could come and access, and we kept that trading hut really, really flexible in terms of opening hours, you know, to get everyone on side. We had a couple of items that we could sell, and I'll be honest, I can't remember what they were, but that just raised enough so that we could do something like put some toilet rolls in the toilets and some soap, arrange for some clean towels for people. So immediately people could see an improvement. Alongside that, we had, and it was October time, around 4 bonfires. We needed to get rid of this vast mountain of rubbish. And we had a couple of skips, a couple of work parties. So immediately, before we settled in for the winter, everyone could see an improvement in how the site looked. Over the winter, we worked on creating a way of creating a sustainable income for the site other than rents. And what we did, we started to grow plants. In the first year, we raised a lot of tomato plants, vegetable plants, sold them to plot holders, invited members of other allotment communities to come round and buy plants from us. And I think we made about £300 from that. That then gave us some money so that we could carry on providing facilities for members and indeed improve. And that we could provide tea and coffee on site. There's always a cup of tea, there's always a cup of coffee there for everyone. And it creates an opportunity to sit down, have a chat, share ideas, and it's amazing how many bright ideas people come up with, and ideas, you know, that we can use moving forward. By year 2, the income that we were making from the plant sales went up to over £600. We had a phenomenal year that year. We used the money from that to start to clear. We have a large rubbish tip. This is about 100-year-old rubbish tip that was covered in black plastic. We started to clear that, and we created a bee garden, sorry. And we used half that money to buy a decent pond liner so that we created a really nice wildlife pond. That then is sending messages out to families that we're more family orientated and that we welcome children coming around. I put on a couple of things for the children in spotting wildlife. Families loved it. So what we do then is we get more volunteers, younger members coming to help volunteer to undertake tasks. And you know, it creates a nicer environment and we get jobs done quicker. The other little thing I did was many allotment sites until then, they would not allow pets anywhere near the site. We decided to book the trend because in most people's lives, the family pet is the family member, just as the same as everybody else is. So we welcome the pets down there. And all I did was I bought a box of bonios. And it sounds daft, but when the animals came, I made sure that the animals, you know, they had a little bonio or made friends with them. And this helps in another way, in that a lot of children that come with family members, they can't have pets at home because they live in flats or members are out at work all the time. So sometimes, you know, you get a lot of children where they haven't had the chance to encounter animals. So by having these pets coming on site, it would give them an opportunity, usually on a Sunday morning, just to come and meet up with a nice friendly dog, help me to give them the bonios. And again, it just helped to build hearts and minds. One thing I would say is COVID, it was the making of our site. We really wanted to get some long-term investment into the site, and we wanted some serious investment going into the site. And before COVID hit, when we looked at funding opportunities, we couldn't really, the way that you went for funding was slightly different from what it is now. And the big benefit about COVID is the fact that it's the funding that's available now, it's to get money out to people that can help communities be outside, enjoy the outside life, and enjoy healthy spaces. We quickly realised that, and one of the first things that we did, when lockdown arrived, Walsall Council stopped the collection of brown bins. Now, brown bins in Walsall is where you put all your garden rubbish. Lockdown started on March the 23rd. The garden season was close to starting, so we've got a lot of people in the area that have got very full brown bins and no way of emptying them, so that other than going to the tip and queuing at the tip to start the new gardening year. So what we said was, look, on a Sunday morning we would open up and we would charge £1 for anyone to come and empty a brown bin. We controlled it very carefully with all the social distancing, everything that was needed. And every Sunday morning we'd have people come in emptying brown bins down at the bottom where we set up the compost farm. What we'd do then is we'd either recycle the rubbish in the compost heap, or we agreed with the community every Wednesday evening we will have a bonfire to get rid of what we can't recycle. We did that. With the proceeds, we managed to buy a beautiful picnic bench and chairs, which we put on our bee garden. That was made out of plastic bottles. But that clearly demonstrated that we were looking to work with the community. And if you like, that was when we started our curriculum vitae, which we could use to start to apply for funding, and gave us some ideas as to what we could do and involve the community at some time, as and when we could in the future. To date, our funding that we've acquired has reached close on £40,000, and that's £40,000 which we are investing in our site. So, how are we investing it? Through Walsall Council, we managed to build a community polytunnel. That polytunnel, we've now, just after 2 years, started up Yorker's Magic Gardening Club. So every Saturday morning we hold a garden club, invite people to come along. Yorker is Kew Garden qualified, so we have a little club there. We get all sorts of people coming. We have plant sale days. They're usually in the earlier spring. and that's continuing to generate close on £1,000 now a year in our plant sales. We invite all sorts of people to come down, and whether we either sell them plants, or if we've got fellow community organisations that are looking to create community gardens, we'll give them plants because we enjoy growing. We have the children down. A recent funding project we've had £10,000 through Severn Trent. We got that because we wanted to develop our community area where we met up. You can see it on our Facebook page, what we've created. And we also wanted to create water farms. The reason we wanted to do that was, one, rainwater is better for plants than tap water. It's also cheaper. And we are installing what we call a water tank, which are basically IBC, interconnecting IBC tanks from every roof that we've got on the allotment, so that as much rainwater as possible is collected and used by allotmenteers. But what we've also done with part of that, on the tops of those tanks, we've got the children now, and the children have all created living roofs to go on top of those IBC tanks, and they had a whale of a time. Part of our new community roof at the back, we've created bird boxes as an integrated part of the roofing system. Severn Trent came down last week to have a look at our work, and they're absolutely made up with what we've done, and they've just said, let us know when you want some more money. So that was well worth. We also applied and achieved lottery funding. Behind our polytunnel, we've created 6 raised beds, and we've gone for oak because it's long lasting. That will be used this year. We're inviting back all the schools because they can start coming back now. And with that, it's easier to teach children if children are stood up rather than leaning over and looking at a hole in the ground. Those raised beds will also be looked after by our gardening club as well. And we're just in discussions with the Duke of Edinburgh people, and we're hoping in the next few weeks we're going to be welcoming about half a dozen students, teenager students with learning difficulties, and just helping them to do some gardening as well. And then the other thing we're doing then is we're putting proper pathways into our bee garden. The other thing that we do every year is we have an open day, and we usually do that around the August bank holidays, just before everyone goes back to school. Tip: the best money spender you can get to come to an open day. If you've got a local microbrewery, get them on site and tell them what we did. Look, you know, if you want to promote your beer, run a beer garden here. You know, we'd like a donation if it works. First year we did that, that worked very, very well. Now every year what we do is on open day, we'll charge £1 per adult on the gate, and we get back further on average around £650 on that day. Some of that money this year we have Father Christmas. My brother plays Father Christmas for the community, and we use it. We buy some presents for the kids, but it's all really nice. It's all working with the community, and it's all making the allotments as part of the community, not sort of an alien world that no one ever goes to. Part of our open days as well, what we do is we will invite small businesses, craft clubs, and animal charities to come on site. And we'll create some little stalls for them. And it's an opportunity for them to promote the businesses, but it's also an opportunity. Remember I said about children and the opportunity to experience wildlife and animals? We have a hedgehog lady that comes every year, and you can't get near her. The kids love to come and see the hedgehogs. If they know Borneo Street's got an allotment day on, can we go and see the hedgehogs? And the lady loves it because she'll make about £200 on the day to help to look after her hedgehogs. Where else have I got? Yeah. So those are the kind of things we're doing. This year, we're looking potentially at putting a food hall on. Oh, some of the other money that we've had money for, people thought I was mad, but I asked the West Midlands Police Proceeds of Crime. They have a fund, and it's all when they sell items, it's come from crime. And I asked them for £1,000, and I asked them for £1,000 for 6 gazebos. Managed to get it. We have 6 3x3 metre gazebos, which are waterproof. And what this does, it means we can put those gazebos up so that if we want to make an outdoor classroom for anyone, we can do so. It's sunproof and it's waterproof, but it's still in the open air. And we use that when the kids did their living roofs, and they brought a picnic. They had a whale of a time, you know, and that's what it's all about. So that's where we are so far with Borneo Street Allotment. So where are we going now? We've now got a further 5-year plan, of which our next achievement, we've got one area. We've got an area, we've created something where we can work with a local creative factory for drawing and painting. We have stuff for the ladies and we have stuff for the children. What we feel we haven't really got currently, and what we do work towards with the community, is to do something for the men. And we have, one of the benefits of getting involved with the community is people contact you and say, I've got this, can you use it? I don't want to waste it. An example of this, sheds, greenhouses. Another example is we have a kitchen that we set up. Everything that we have in that kitchen came from donations. And there's even part of the stuff I got in there. I was taking some rubbish to the tip, and the lady next to me had a lovely glass bowl. And I said, are you going to throw that away? And when they explained, she said, I've got a few more. And we kitted out the whole kitchen with lots of plates, cups and saucers, everything that we wanted. So it does work. So what we've still got now is we want to set up a combination machinery workshop, and also I've got some funding where I can purchase some marquees and some chairs and tables. Now they're not just for Borneo Street Allotment, they're for the whole of the borough. What we do try and do is at Borneo Street, we also help and support another allotment sites. And, you know, if something works for us, we'll share it. And the same way, if we can get equipment and you know, for the benefit of the community, we'll share that as well. So these chairs and tables, they will be on offer for all allotment sites and green spaces across the borough, so that if they're running an open day looking to raise money, then that's kind of, you know, that material's there for them. And as part of that, we'll be looking to develop a men's shed. The final thing, which is a good money spinner, which I forgot to mention actually, I did touch briefly and say at the bottom of our site we have what's called a compost farm. It's down the back of the car park, and round the edge of the car park was just wasted trees, and occasionally you find bags of rubbish down there and it wasn't doing anything. So what we did, we got a lot of pallets and we created a lot of compost base. So every week we go to a local farm shop, and any fruit and vegetables that they haven't sold, on a Thursday morning they're brought down to site and we compost them. We have various like hobby gardeners, landscape gardeners that have plots on site. So rather than wasting what they've dug up, like grass mowings and things, all that comes down on site, we compost that. We're registered on a website, and when we have our boriculturalists working in the area, they'll ring up and say, Chris, we've got some logs and some wood chippings. Would you like them? Yes, please. So the wood chippings will go into the compost heap, and that's all recycled. The logs we have in a big pile. Then we'll have Sunday morning workouts. We'll chop all the logs up, and that's another bit of our income because we sell them for log burners, and it all pays for the nice bits for the site. We don't need to worry too much. We can keep our rent and our costs as a minimum, because we develop our income for development from other ways, which is what we can sell from the site and from funding. Some of those logs recently, we've been getting some nice hardwoods, some lime wood, ash, and some eucalyptus. And we've a couple of wood turners coming down now, and they're taking it, and they're making nice things. And the rule for that is, okay, you come and have some logs. What we would like in return is some, if you turn us a nice bowl or a platter for our community area, that would be fine. The other thing that we did finally is, and I'm putting these out to give ideas to other people of things that you could do. That's why I'm sort of mentioning them all. At Junction 10, you have seen that there's been some massive roadworks going on. We got in touch with the people who were running that, and we've had 68 pallets delivered to site. They've all been turned into urban furniture. But some really good stuff with that, and we've got a banqueting table, we've got a picnic shelter, the backs for the bird boxes, we've got all sorts of, anything like that. You can get stuff like that, and you can turn it into things to sell, or you can turn it into things to use on site. But it's all part of integrating with the community, and that's what I think. Those are the kind of things that we firmly believe at Borneo Street is what makes a community association, particularly an allotment association, successful. And importantly, it attracts the ability to be able to apply and obtain funding to further improve the community. So that's about it from me. If anybody's got any questions, I'm quite happy to take questions. Thank you.
Okay. Bernadette's got her hand up.
Sorry, it wasn't a question. I was just giving a round of applause for that lovely presentation. Well done, you.
I thought I was rambling a bit, but
No, it's nice to see that you're also proactive, particularly around the grants.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Every site should have one.
Yep, I've written some of it down.
Any more questions for Christine? No, we're all stunned, Christine, because it's you've compressed all that into 20 minutes, but that's hundreds of small steps, isn't it? Hundreds of bringing people together, all those community meetings, building up your infrastructure. It sort of reminded me of Liz's jigsaw, really.
Yes.
But with a community focus, it's all those integrated skills and resources and people's time to contribute. I think we have another question. I can't see who it's from. Oh, is that from Ellen?
Yes, it is. Hi again.
Hi, Ellen.
Yeah, brilliant presentation, Christine. Thank you very much. I was just wondering if I could pick your brains for a little bit more information on which funding bodies you went to.
Yes. The first one is the Lottery Awards for All. You can have, well, we just go for the £10,000 every year. Okay. They have 3 main aims. It's very, very easy to apply for. And I'll be quite happy to help you, to get the head around. Just look at Lottery Awards for All. That's the first and foremost one. The other one we went to was the Severn Trent. Severn Trent, very keen on community and anything to do with water. There are quite a few environmentally type funds, and particularly COVID related funds. Now, here in Walsall, we have an organisation called One Walsall, and I get a newsletter from them every month. And it says, these are the people that's looking to to give money out. If you want to send me your email address, then I can share that with you, because as long as they're not just West Midlands orientated funds, they're equally the kind of funds that you could look at.
Great.
Before COVID hit, I applied for 2 or 3 funds to get a bit of practice in. We didn't get any funding, but the reason we didn't is because we weren't going to benefit enough people. If you remember at the presentation I was doing, I said you've got to build up your curriculum vitae. And that's what COVID did for us. One of the things that we did, another thing when COVID hit, was we have the street teams here, and they were struggling to keep people fed. Some of the more disadvantaged families, particularly those that were self-employed in one way or another, you know, single parent families feeding kids. So what we did every Thursday morning, we had a group of ladies get together, and we'd source out all sorts of food from different sources, put them all together in boxes, and then the street teams would come and collect and distribute them. And so that helped the community, but it helped us as well, because we could then turn around to Suffolk and say, well, this is what we've been doing. This is where we've been helping the community. And that's the secret.
Brilliant.
You know, that one of the questions they'll ask you is, how many people will this money benefit? Well, because of the way we give things up, I could quite happily turn around and say at least 1,000. Rather than saying, well, we've got 40 plot holders.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if you look at our Facebook group, yeah, we've got 40 big plots. We've now got about 53 plot holders because we've split them down. I'm quite happy, if anyone's interested, I'll explain why we split them down and what we did for that, for learning. But our Facebook group, our main group, is close on 400 members. Now, we're just an allotment site. That's all we are, a little allotment site in Walsall. We're half the size of some of the big allotment sites, but it's the community, and that's what gives us the funding and the way to develop our site.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Christine.
Brilliant. Thank you, Christine. Thanks for questions. Any more questions before we just move on to our next presenter? Okay, I'm going to share screens again then. So it's not time to welcome Wayne Priestley from APSI. Wayne's going to share the findings of the State of the Market Allotment Report 2021. So over to you, Wayne.
I should say thank you, but how do I follow that? That was an incredible presentation. There's a book in there somewhere, I'm sure there is. For those people who don't know who we are, APSI stands for, very grandly, the Association for Public Service Excellence, and we provide advice and examples of innovation and best practice to local authorities across the UK. And one of the things we do is we produce a state of the market survey. If I could just move on a couple of slides there, Alison. Can we move the slides on?
Yeah, can you see that?
Yeah, got it. What these state of the market surveys are is we do them across a number of local authority services. But what it is, it's trying to find out what are the key issues going on in a particular service, in this case, allotments. And we ask similar questions each year. So for allotments, it's been running for about 10 years or so, I think. And we ask all APSI local authority members across the UK. We've got about 300 local authorities as members. And then what we do is, from the survey results, we express the key findings in a report. And this report can be used for benchmarking, it can be used for performance management, seeing how you fare against other authorities. And it looks at a number of different areas. So it might be the cost of allotments, it might be how you manage allotments, what facilities you've got. And I'll go through these during the presentation. And a lot of the information you'll see in here, it's not all of it, it's just the key areas. Back up a lot of the things like Chris and Liz have been mentioning, and Christine's just mentioned there. So it actually might sort of help with some of that. It's used by national government as well. We've had government asking us for this information, and it's helped in things like developing the national litter strategy, and more recently the UK State of the Parks report that we did with, I think, one of your members, Ian Baggott, who's from CFP. So it is used quite a lot, and of all the surveys we do, probably the allotments one is the one that gathers most interest. We usually get a hit from Horticulture Week. We've had the Independent on, we've had the Times on. So allotments is a big issue at the moment for a lot of people. So this survey is quite useful in helping that. And we also try and use it to sort of help local authorities as well, particularly allotment managers, to show them the importance of the service to the community and therefore maybe get them a bit more extra funding. Next slide, please. So some of the key findings, and there is a lot of information here. I do apologise for this, but I will try and sort of make it a little bit more than just reading a list of figures. But most councils, well, from the survey that we did, and we had about 50 plus councils responded to it. So that's a reasonable standard of representation. Most of the, all of the respondents actually said that they had council allotments. So all councils across the country do seem to be providing some measure of allotment sites. And 30% of them were directly managed by council officers. Now, I have to say this is just representative of the 50 who responded. So these figures may vary slightly. 63% actually were run between the council and a site committee, which seemed the most popular approach. And of the ones who responded, 7% said they were managed solely by allotment associations. Now, I think that's probably a low figure. I think there's probably a lot more allotment associations out there that are doing this. But one of the things we did notice was there's been a slight drop in the number of sites being managed solely by allotment associations, and more of going towards a joint hand-in-glove approach with councils. Now, that may be that it's just simply that the council's there as a backup. The bulk of the management is probably done by the associations themselves. What we did find in regards to managing the sites, there is a heavy reliance on plot holders and volunteers. A lot of it is down to very much the people on site. What we did find is that a lot of the big work, though, still falls with the council. So repairing of fences, maintenance of pathways, some of the grounds maintenance that falls outside the allotment plot area. So there is a bit of a sort of give and take, I think, between councils and allotment holders in relation to the actual maintenance of sites. Next slide, please. Can we move on to the next slide, please?
Yeah, that you should see plot ownership now, Wayne.
Ah, right, there we go. We seem to have skipped a slide there, I think.
Sorry, yes, monitoring of allotment use.
Yeah.
Too heavy.
I did tell you there's a lot of information. Yeah, well, don't go back. I'll just mention this very quickly. It doesn't need to have the slide up. When we looked at the monitoring of how sites are looked after, we still found that a lot of them were being monitored by the council themselves to ensure that standards were being maintained. About a third of sites are actually monitored by site representatives, so it's still very much a council thing. I think it's because obviously it's council land and they just want to ensure some of the things that Liz mentioned in our discussion about what we expect allotments to look like and how they expect them to be managed. Councils still like to sort of see that it's being done properly. The actual one where we actually ask the question, how long do you give people if they aren't maintaining their sites when these monitoring inspection visits happen? Most people say they give between 1 and 3 months before they actually take action. And most of that action is usually through an initial warning letter followed by an inspection, in which case if the work hasn't been done, some of them will actually send termination notes out to the contract, or they'll put the plot holder on a probationary period. So there's a variety of approaches, but I think 3 months is what people are giving on the whole before they take action if they feel a plot's not being used, because as we all know, plots are valuable at the moment, so to have them standing idle just isn't fair. So on plot ownership, 40% of the respondents said they restrict plot ownership to one person or a single household, and also say that they will, if that plot becomes available, pass it on to families or friends. But what we're seeing is that's tending to change slightly, and this is down to the fact that the waiting lists are becoming a problem for some authorities. The other thing that people are starting to do with allotment plots is to actually reduce the size of them to create more plots. And when we've asked them why this has happened, they've often said, well, the old style plot, the big 250 square metre plot, is too big. And people are struggling sometimes with the size of those plots. So they're reducing them, and they're giving those sort of plots often to probationary period. People who are new to allotments, who sometimes come in with a great deal of enthusiasm and then suddenly realise just how much work's involved. So they get a bit of a taster before they give them any larger plots. With regards to allowing people to hold more than one plot, if there's a history of doing that, we often find that that continues. And it basically, a lot of people are saying with regards to that, they are starting to move away from allowing multiple plot ownership, and that's purely because, as I say, of the demand for it. Also, if there's a big waiting list, they won't let people have more than one allotment plot. And also, if there isn't, they'll still say, well, you can have it for the next 12 months, but beyond that, we'll have to reconsider that one. But what we are finding also is a lot of councils are now moving to only allowing people allotment plots if they are residents in their area, where previously people would jump in the queue by going to areas where they felt that the waiting list wasn't as long. Next slide, please. Could we just move on a slide or two?
Yeah, we're on plot ownership. Do you want me to move on from that way?
Yeah, it should read disputes and site security.
There you go. I think it's a bit slow coming to you.
Right, no problem. Well, with regards to, there was a mention before about with the role of stewards and representatives, the issue over, you know, if there's a dispute or people get worked up over some issue that they're not finding resolved. 52% of respondents said their authority had a policy in place for handling disputes. And as a consequence of that, there is this ability to sort of go through a procedure. And a lot of people do have policies for if somebody's taken off an allotment plot, they do allow an appeal to happen. And even on self-managed sites, local authorities are asking that there is a policy there both for disputes and appeals. So it's to ensure that, you know, just because maybe you don't like someone, they're not unfairly dealt with. So there has to be a written policy. In relation to security, it was one that was coming up more and more. It is difficult because on a lot of these sites, people have sheds, and some of these sheds have a lot of quite expensive equipment in them. So break-ins were becoming a feature that we noticed. People were saying, yeah, we seem to be having an upsurge in antisocial behaviour and break-ins. So we were asking the question about, well, how do you deal with security? Half of the plot holders say that they manage their own security. So whether that's someone who lives close by or someone goes down regularly. But what we were seeing also is on some of the sites, they were installing CCTV cameras on there. And we're actually getting them built in to be able to monitor the site when there's no one on site. They were also putting lockable gates on with locks that couldn't have keys cut for them by anybody. There was also a strict protocol as to who could actually have a key. Some were asking local PCSOs to build it into the beat. But interestingly, I think Christine mentioned this, the neighbours around the sites are used very much for helping to keep the security there. They usually have a contact with one of the allotment plot holders. So if they see anything untoward, they'll ring them straight away, and then we can get, you know, they can get the police or PCSOs down there to address that problem. Next slide, please. The next slide is looking at facilities at allotment sites. I hope it is anyway. It is a bit slow coming to me. But what you can see there is quite a lot of different facilities that are now starting to appear on allotment sites. Obviously, from most allotment sites' point of view, they want clear boundaries and decent pathways. These are often the most expensive things to provide. And I think that is still very much sitting with the council. And that's why I think you're getting more of this joint council and a site user working together closely, because some of the costs in these run into tens of thousands of pounds, if not more. And that's often very difficult for sites to bring the money up for that. So I'm impressed with the work that Christine's done on that one. Toilet facilities are a big one, and mains water are clearly ones that people do. Composting, you know, most people are there to sort of reduce the costs of waste, so composting is a good one. Christine was showing some excellent examples of how she's actually helping others to compost. And community rooms and huts, big on-site presence. More and more people get in there, and I think that goes back to the community element where, you know, at one time everybody had their own little plot with their own little shed, but now there's more of a community feel about allotment sites. And obviously if you're doing open days and things like that, it's nice to have that sort of facility on site. If we could move to the next slide, please. This is council budgets for allotments. I mean, what does surprise us, and I understand that councils have serious sort of demands on the budgets, and most council budgets are constantly being cut year after year after year. So that, you know, there isn't money available for non-statutory provision. I think in Scotland now there is a statutory requirement to provide allotments if it's requested, but still in England and Wales, I don't think there's a statutory requirement. But councils to have to find money for it for somewhere, and this is where you can see most of the budgets being spent. Most of it is actually on fencing, maintenance and repair, and pathways, roadways and steps. So there's a lot of information and a lot of cost involved in that sort of thing. There is very little money for other things in there. And when it's good to see when water's mentioned about being more conservation minded with water, because that's one of the other biggest elements that councils are still paying out for. And if we just move on to the next slide, please. This one is actually showing basically the monies that the cost for an allotment plot. And I don't know how it is in the East Midlands, but what we're finding is costs of allotments are increasing, and many authorities are looking to increase them, but still very, very few are actually making any money out of them, and they're not there for that. I think councils, you know, have never intended allotments to be money spinners. But looking at the slide, when it does come up, you may be seeing it there at the moment for costs of an allotment plot. Almost 40% are now charging over £70, and the bulk of the rest are charging between £40 and £70. So you can see hopefully the slide there in front of you. Very few are now actually charging any less than sort of £40 and above. And even so, the actual amount of money that local authorities are getting, and I think Chris Warman mentioned it very early on in his presentation, most plots are subsidised. There are very, very few councils actually making, as I say, any money out of it, if any are at all. Most of the sort of commercial plots that you see on sites, they're in the hundreds of pounds per annum. So you can see local authorities are nowhere near covering the costs on allotment plots. And we'll just touch on that point a little later on. If I could get the next slide, please. This is about charging policies. Most people actually say they charge based on the area of the allotment, i.e. the square meterage. So very much it's still you pay for what you get. And most authorities did say that they will be looking to probably increase the cost of allotment plots over the coming 5 years. Of those who said they weren't, most of them said they are reviewing the prices. But even despite all those costs, and you can see the charge there to allotment holders, only 33% said that it actually covered the cost of providing allotments in their area. No one said in the responses that they were making a profit, and the rest of them said they were subsidising it. So almost 70% of local authorities that responded to the survey are actually subsidising the cost of their allotments. So the next slide, which hopefully you can see, is in relation to waiting lists. And this has been what has attracted probably the most media attention, is why aren't councils providing more allotments if they're so great and, you know, everybody wants, well, why aren't the councils doing more to do that? Almost over half of the councils that responded said they had on average 100 to 400 people on their waiting list for allotments, and 40% stated they got over 1,000 people on waiting for allotments. That was only 20% in 2020. So you can see in the intervening 2 years, that waiting list of where they've got over 1,000 has doubled. So it's showing that people are wanting that sort of connection with allotments and growing their own food. And one of the comments was, oh, well, that's because, you know, there's huge waiting lists because the councils don't sort of check whether people are still there or whether they want them. 90% stated that they have their waiting lists regularly updated because they're getting pressure to provide these allotment sites. So what they're not doing is letting them lie dormant. They're actually trying to get a process in there that moves people on quickly if they're not using those sites. Because what they don't want them to be is just bolt holes for people to escape to. If people want to grow food, if they want to grow flowers, great, that's what they're there for. They're not simply there just for somewhere you can, you know, get away from the house for half an hour or so on. So there is a lot of that sort of constant monitoring of sites. 34% of councils said the average waiting time for an allotment was 18 months or more. So there's you know, there is that big demand there. And as I mentioned previously, 70% are now saying they only give allotments to people who live in their postcode areas, because they just don't have the facility to sort of give them to people outside the area. Next slide, please. The COVID effect, I think Christine was talking about how, you know, she's actually found a positive during that period in relation to finding funding. But we asked councils, have you experienced an increase in demand during the COVID lockdown period? 94% said they'd all had increased demand for allotments during that period. And I think from what you saw in the media, allotments were being seen not only for the benefits that they bring in relation to health and well-being, it's also community cohesion, which Christine mentioned, and it's also things like, you know, the ability to sort of just reconnect with nature through biodiversity, or you know, just getting out and spending some quality time with your family, because a lot of people were bringing the children along to the allotments and actually getting them involved. It's surprising how many children don't know where food comes from. And I know that sounds daft in this day and age, but there are still a lot of kids out there. If you say, well, how'd you get peas? Where did they grow from? Not a clue. You know, where do carrots come from? You know, do they grow on trees or what? You know, a lot of people still don't understand that connection with food. Next slide, please. This slide is about in relation to how we can use allotments for environmental sustainability. Most local authorities now are being asked to sort of, what actions are they taking to help climate change or help biodiversity? When we asked allotment plot holders and councils, what do they do in relation to environmental sustainability? Nearly 2/3 said they have set areas aside for wildlife, and actually provide the allotment holders, the tenants and so on, with information on how to improve biodiversity. So, you know, as Christine was talking there about her wildlife plots and the sort of work on pollinators and so on, you know, a lot of that now is being sort of taken on board in allotments, because as I said before, at one time it was about growing food or growing flowers. I think people now have seen the wider benefits of what allotments can bring. organic growing as well in relation to reducing the way we treat the soil. You know, soil is a valuable commodity, but we tend to forget that. And if you start pouring chemicals into it, pretty soon you've got a desert. And people are also looking more at trying to promote native crops. You know, we all expect to be able to get strawberries 24/7 now. At one time, you used to get them in the 3-month period in the year. Now we expect them all year long. So when we're looking at crops, we're looking at more seasonality in the way we grow our crops as well. And that means growing more of our own native crops. Next slide, please. This is in relation to future increases in allotment provision. Councils are struggling to provide allotment sites, and that is often because of the demand on free land space in areas, particularly in highly densely populated areas where there isn't that ability to provide allotments. You know, councils are being faced with massive housing targets now, and to be able to say, well, we're going to give over this huge area to allotments where I could have got 150 houses in, it's a very difficult balancing thing to do. Councils are still the mainstay of providing new land for allotments, but some of them are now actually being built into new housing developments as part of an agreement that people can develop. They're saying, well, if that's the case, we expect some green space in there, and allotments is a popular option for people. Community groups are actually taking on bits of land, which I think was mentioned in one of the presentations. And also we've now got things like education and social services building it into there. Christine mentioned a wide variety of benefits that she was looking at for children with special needs and so on. What I found was the NHS is also a good source of funding, because you know, we have very high obesity rates in this country. We have major problems with heart attacks. We have also a growing problem with dementia and senility. And these are things that actually gardening can help either increase your exercise or your contact with people. So the allotments are playing a much, much bigger role than just simply places where we grow some food for the family or plant flowers. So I think just one final comment here on the issue of allotments. What we are finding is that local authorities are still very much in the fore as the leader in the providers of allotments, and associations developing those to give them more empowerment is a key move that they're moving towards. I don't think local authorities ever see allotments as making money. So when you consider, somebody might say, well, it's £70 a year for an allotment. It's just over £1 a week. You couldn't get a coffee for that. So they are still very good value for what they provide. And I think councils actually are willing to provide them if they can find the land, because there are multiple benefits they bring. There's healthier lifestyles. It protects green spaces. It reduces food air miles as well if we can grow more of our own food and become more, you know, self-sufficient in that. It improves biodiversity opportunities. And now, because of climate change, we're getting more and more heavy rain. So allotments are great soakaways for some of this and can be used as part of flood alleviation plans. And obviously, pollinators, the reduction in a lot of our native wildlife. Allotments do have an opportunity to help put some of that back by creating spaces for them. There's also a lot of social benefits. There's a lot of intergenerational work goes on allotments where, you know, the older people and the younger people could mix together and get to understand each other better. We've also got people who may not normally be ones to go out in the communities. They may not have a lot of friends or a big friends network. Allotments can provide that social cohesion. What we're finding is, because of those benefits, councils are now building allotments into their well-being strategies and local development plans. The coronavirus pandemic showed just how important that provision is. And although there's a lot of need for allotments, it is going to be an uphill struggle to get more and more provided. But I think ultimately councils are doing their best to actually provide more and more allotment space. So thank you for that. Is that okay, Alison?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Wayne. That's really fantastic information there, really helpful. Have we got any questions for Wayne on that presentation? Ellen, was that your hand I saw there?
No, that was just a round of applause. Thank you very much, Wayne. That was really good.
Thank you for staying awake.
I think we've got a question here. Let me just click on that to see who that is. Sorry, my screen's decided to stick. There's someone with their hand up. Would you like to speak to me?
Hi, yeah, it's Steve Bird from Lincoln. Just a quick question. There's a whole load of really useful information in there, so thank you for that. My quick question is there a, and it is a tricky question, a sort of general benchmark in terms of the costs that for a local authority for an average plot size? I'm thinking about our first speaker talked about the burden of, if I can call it that, on local authorities of the cost and the transfer to self-managing sites. So I'm just wondering if there is an average cost or an indicative range of costs that local authorities should expect, if that's the right way of putting it, for operating a given plot. Tricky question, I know.
There isn't, well, on one of the slides there, Steve, there was a sort of chart that showed the average costs that are being charged by local authorities. I think, to be honest, it depends on how local authorities perceive the value of allotment. So if you've got an area that suffers from high deprivation and sort of, you know, difficulty in finding family meals at times, they might well go very low on the price of allotments to get more and more people involved in that because of the social benefits it brings. In other areas, it might be dictated by the cost of land. It might be dictated by the sort of what they think they can charge. But most local authorities are subsidising allotments. I don't think anybody is making money on them.
Thanks, yeah, and I know it's a tricky question to ask, and I know there are so many variables that, you know, even if there was a figure, it would have to be qualified well and truly. It's just that we do face constant numbers of questions, really, in terms of what we consider to be our overhead costs. By the time we've added in everybody in the authority's costs, anybody wants to charge anything to allotments, and it you know, it looks like a very disproportionate size and cost per plot. When you take everything, the cost of democracy and everything else into consideration, and I realise the ways of stripping that out. I was just looking really to see if there was a benchmark, and perhaps it's too difficult a question.
Yeah, as I say, I think it very much depends on how local authorities see them, you know, the value that they bring. I think, to be honest, it would be quite useful if someone actually could show what the value per person is in relation to the external benefits they get, like health and well-being and so on, and, you know, the time out there. But I know that there's been estimates made on the benefits to of green spaces to the National Health Service, runs somewhere in the billions in relation to, you know, it being sort of proactive in reducing some of the problems people were presenting. Obviously on exercise and healthy living and so on. So I think, to be honest, costs is a very difficult one to answer, purely because it depends how the council perceives the value of them.
Wayne, I think I was wondering if you found as well that the facilities on site often have an influence, because if you're going to a site like Christine's, where you've got, you know, trading huts and a kitchen and toilet facilities, you know, I would imagine that people are willing to pay a little bit more for those sorts of facilities rather than just a bog standard plot. Yeah,
I think you're probably right there, but that often depends on whether the money is going to a self-management group. The self-management group may sort of reap those benefits, but on the whole, councils tend to charge per size. If they can provide facilities, they may feel it's worth investing in those sites, as I mentioned, for the other benefits you get as well. But certainly from the sites I ran years ago in Salford in Greater Manchester, a lot of the facilities were actually brought on by the plot holders themselves. So your community huts, you know, they get one of the old sort of containers from someone. They'd bring their own water butts on to conserve water and so on. So there is very much that sort of, I think from a commercial side, they probably would charge on the number of facilities they've got. Yeah, I think that probably would be right.
Great. Do we have any more questions for Wayne? I think that's it. I was just going to add as well, Wayne, I've put a link in because APSI do allotment management training as well for your members, I understand. So I've put that link in later on for us as well. So at this point, I'm just hoping that James, if you're online now, James is going to pause the recording and then we will be moving on to our question time panel.